Hello again, everybody. Here's an interesting little game that was played in Vienna in 1894 with Schlechter with the white pieces and Wolf with the black, and it's a French defense. And it starts out e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, white plays the bishop to g5, black plays bishop to e7, and now white goes ahead and takes off the knight at f6, and black recaptures with the bishop. Now white brings out his other knight to f3, black goes ahead and castles. Now white moves the e-pawn up to e5, hitting at the bishop, and the bishop retreats to e7. Now white brings out the bishop from f1 to d3, and black brings out his bishop from c8 to d7. White now moves his h-pawn up to h4, and black plays his f-pawn up to f6, hoping of course to open up the f-file for his rook. And now white plays a surprising move. He takes his knight at f3 and moves it up to g5, basically offering it to the pawn. Now the threat, of course, is that both the knight at g5 and the bishop at d3 are threatening the h7 pawn. And if black, say, wanted to just defend it by moving his g-pawn up to g6, that would be a mistake, because then white could just play knight takes h7, and if black took the knight with the king, then white would come in with queen to h5 check, and obviously the g-pawn is pinned by the bishop back on d3, and it doesn't matter whether black would play the king to g8 or say g7, white would finish the game with queen takes g6 check, and after the king moves into the corner, white would just play queen to h7 checkmate. So if we go back to the offering of the knight, black takes the knight, f takes g5. And that's when white fires a second little torpedo. He plays bishop takes h7 check. Now obviously he wants black to capture the bishop so that white could play h takes g5 with a discovered check from the rook. But suppose black doesn't want to take it. Suppose he decides to just move the king to one of the two squares that's available to him, like say h8. That would probably be a mistake too, of course, because white would play queen to h5 and basically threaten pretty much a fatal discovered check by moving the bishop. Or if black decided to move his king to the other available square, f7, that would definitely be a mistake, because white would then again, of course, come in with queen to h5 check, and black's only move would be to block with the g-pawn, and white would then just play queen takes g6 checkmate. So black doesn't really have any choice. He takes the bishop at h7, and white plays h takes g5 check. And now, once again, black has a couple of choices. If he wanted to, he could move the king, say, to g6, but that also would end in tragedy, because white would then just play queen to h5 check, and after the king moves to his only square, f5, then white would just simply bring the rook up to h3, and there is absolutely no move on the board that stops him from bringing the rook over to f3 with checkmate. I mean, even if black would say play bishop takes g5, it doesn't do any good. Rook to f3 is still checkmate, because the bishop now is pinned. So black, after the discovered check, moves the king back to g8. And now, after all of that, believe it or not, it's time for the challenge to the viewer. If you'd like to pause the video now and see if you can find white's next move, I'll wait for you. White now plays rook to h8 check. And black realizes that if he takes the rook, here's what will happen. White, of course, will come in with queen to h5 check, and after the king moves back to g8, then white will simply play the pawn up to g6. And either white is going to checkmate at h7, or if black wants to, he can delay that a move and he can take his rook and move it over to e8, and then white, of course, would just play queen to h7 check, and after the king moved over to f8, then queen to h8 is checkmate. So black decides not to capture the rook and instead moves the king to f7. But it doesn't matter, because now white comes in with the queen at h5 check, and the only move is to block the check is with the pawn to g6. Then white plays queen to h7 check, and after the king's only move, which is to e8, white finishes it with queen takes g6 checkmate. A lot of little possibilities in this particular game. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.